The town of Blackwood had its fair share of local legends, but none more infamous than the Blackwood Asylum. Built in the early 1900s, it was a place meant to offer solace to the mentally ill. Instead, it became a site of horror, shrouded in mystery and death. For decades, stories circulated about the cruel experiments conducted by Dr. Victor Harlow, the asylum's head psychiatrist. Patients disappeared, screams echoed through the night, and by 1965, the state shut it down. Since then, the building had been left to decay, a relic of a grim past. On a chilly October night, 5 teenagers gathered at the edge of Blackwood Forest, a mile away from the abandoned asylum. Tom, the leader of the group, held a flashlight under his chin, casting eerie shadows on his face. "All right, guys, tonight's the night," he said, grinning. "We're going to prove that the stories are just that, stories." "Who's in?" Julia, Tom's girlfriend, shivered but nodded. She hated how easily Tom could get under her skin, but she wasn't about to back down. Mark, the quiet one, adjusted his glasses and gave a hesitant thumbs up. Laura and Kevin, the thrill-seekers of the group, were already brimming with excitement. "Let's do this!" Kevin exclaimed. They set off towards the asylum, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The forest was eerily silent, as if holding its breath. As they approached the looming structure, a sense of unease settled over them. The asylum stood like a black silhouette against the starless sky, its broken windows like empty eye sockets watching them. The heavy iron gates creaked as they pushed them open, and they stepped into the overgrown courtyard. Weeds and ivy had claimed the once manicured gardens, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. Tom led the way, pushing open the massive wooden doors that groaned in protest. The interior was even more chilling. The flashlight beams revealed peeling wallpaper, rusted medical equipment, and shattered glass littering the floor. Graffiti from previous trespassers adorned the walls, warning them to turn back. "Let's split up," Tom suggested. "We'll cover more ground that way." Julia grabbed his arm. "Are you serious? Haven't you seen any horror movies?" Tom chuckled. "Come on, Jules. We'll be fine. We'll meet back here in an hour." Reluctantly, they agreed and split into pairs. Tom and Julia took the east wing, while Mark, Laura, and Kevin explored the west. Tom and Julia navigated the labyrinthine hallways, the sound of their footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. They passed rooms with rusted bed frames and moldy mattresses, evidence of the suffering that had taken place within these walls. As they turned a corner, Julia gasped. Before them was the electroshock therapy room, the equipment still intact. Straps hung limply from the gurney, and a thick layer of dust coated everything. "Let's get out of here," Julia whispered, her voice trembling. Tom nodded, for once not arguing. They moved on, finding themselves in a long hallway lined with doors. Each door had a small, barred window, through which they could see the remnants of the patients' rooms. Suddenly, a door at the end of the hall slammed shut, the sound reverberating through the asylum. Julia screamed, and Tom grabbed her hand, pulling her towards the exit. They ran, their breaths coming in ragged gasps, but when they reached the main hall, they found it blocked by a heavy, iron gate that hadn't been there before. "Tom, what's happening?" Julia cried. "I don't know," he replied, his bravado gone. "But we need to find the others." Meanwhile, Mark, Laura, and Kevin ventured deeper into the West Wing. They stumbled upon the medical wing, where Dr. Harlow had conducted his experiments. The rooms were filled with rusty surgical instruments and yellowed patient files. Mark picked up a file, his curiosity piqued. "Look at this," he said. "Patient 104. Subjected to experimental treatments. Severe trauma. This place is a nightmare." Laura shivered. "Let's keep moving. This place gives me the creeps." As they continued, they heard a faint, melodic humming. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Kevin, ever the daredevil, followed the sound, leading them to a staircase that spiraled down into the darkness. "Are you sure about this?" Mark asked, his voice wavering. Kevin nodded. "We've come this far. We might as well see it through." They descended the stairs, the temperature dropping with each step. At the bottom, they found themselves in the basement, a network of tunnels that seemed to stretch on forever. The humming grew louder, more distinct, and they followed it to a large, iron door. Kevin pushed it open, revealing a cavernous room filled with rows of cots. On each cot lay a mannequin, dressed in tattered patient gowns. But these mannequins were different. Each had a face, eerily lifelike, with expressions of pain and terror frozen in time. "What the hell is this?" Laura whispered, her voice barely audible. Before anyone could answer, the door slammed shut behind them. The mannequins began to twitch and move, their glassy eyes turning towards the intruders. Tom and Julia, having found no sign of their friends, stumbled upon a hidden stairwell leading to the basement. They followed it, desperate to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the asylum. At the bottom, they heard the same humming and saw a faint light coming from beneath the door. They burst into the room just as the mannequins began to close in on Mark, Laura, and Kevin. Tom swung his flashlight, smashing it into the nearest mannequin's face. It shattered like porcelain, revealing a hollow interior filled with dark, shadowy mist. "We need to get out of here," Tom shouted, pulling Julia towards the door. The group ran through the tunnels, the sound of their pursuers growing fainter. They finally emerged into a large chamber, its walls lined with shelves of dusty books and medical records. In the center stood a large, ornate mirror, its surface swirling with dark energy. "This must be it," Mark said, panting. "The source of the hauntings." As they approached the mirror, they saw the reflection of a man in a white coat, Dr. Harlow. His eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and he reached out from the mirror, his hand passing through the glass. "You cannot escape," he hissed. "This is my domain." With a surge of adrenaline, Tom grabbed a nearby chair and hurled it at the mirror. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, releasing a wave of dark energy that knocked them to the ground. When they regained consciousness, the asylum was silent. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, and the mannequins were nothing more than shattered pieces on the floor. They made their way back to the main hall, finding the iron gate now open. "Let's get out of here," Julia said, her voice shaky. They stumbled out into the courtyard, the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon. The asylum stood silent and foreboding behind them, but it no longer held the same power. As they walked back through the forest, they remained silent, each lost in their thoughts. They had faced the darkness and emerged, but the memory of the asylum would haunt them forever. In the distance, a faint humming could still be heard, carried on the wind. The ghosts of the abandoned asylum would never truly rest, but for now, the teenagers had escaped their grasp. Months passed, and the events of that night became a distant memory for the group. They never spoke of it, each trying to move on in their own way. But the experience had left its mark. Tom and Julia grew closer, their shared ordeal forging a bond that was unbreakable. Mark delved into research about the asylum, determined to uncover the truth behind Dr. Harlow's experiments. Laura and Kevin, once thrill-seekers, found solace in quieter pursuits, the memory of the mannequin's lifeless eyes a constant reminder of their brush with the supernatural. Despite their efforts to move on, the asylum remained a looming presence in their minds. It was as if a part of them had never truly left. They would often catch themselves glancing towards the forest, the faint humming echoing in their ears. One evening, as the group gathered at Julia's house, Mark revealed something he had found. He placed an old, dusty book on the table, its leather cover cracked and worn. "I found this in the library archives," he said. "It's Dr. Harlow's journal." They exchanged uneasy glances but leaned in as Mark began to read. The journal detailed the doctor's descent into madness, his obsession with harnessing the power of the human mind. He believed that through his experiments, he could achieve immortality, trapping the souls of his patients within the asylum's walls. The final entry sent chills down their spines. "The mirror is the key. Through it, I shall transcend mortality and become eternal. But beware, for those who look upon it shall be trapped forever." The group sat in silence, the weight of the revelation sinking in. The mirror had been destroyed, but the asylum's power still lingered. They had faced the darkness once and survived, but they knew that the ghosts of the abandoned asylum would always be a part of them. Years later, the story of the Blackwood Asylum had become a legend, passed down through generations. The town of Blackwood thrived, its dark past buried beneath the sands of time. But the asylum remained, a decaying monument to a bygone era. One crisp autumn night, a new group of teenagers stood at the edge of Blackwood Forest, their faces lit with excitement and curiosity. They had heard the stories, dared each other to explore the haunted asylum. As they pushed open the creaking iron gates, a faint humming echoed through the night, and the spirits of the abandoned asylum stirred once more, ready to welcome new souls into their eternal embrace.